So let me see, what else did people ask? There was pasting, there was roots as an artist, there was spirituality. I'll answer that one. I think that I never have like had any kind of a spiritual practice that's been specific, but I feel like that first moment when I realized that I didn't know what I was doing, and that I kind of felt almost that I was like dreaming my own life into being. I think that was a moment that I instantly, not maybe instantly, maybe slowly kind of recognized as a kind of a spiritual practice that I feel like so much of what I have done over the last few years has been about kind of like seeing the status quo, or seeing the world and seeing the set of possibilities that you're given, and that people tell you, okay, like this is how things go, this is what's possible, this is how a normal day proceeds, this is how normal life proceeds. And then just kind of believing that you don't have to settle for that, and that you can have an idea and sort of interrupt the way that people feel that kind of things go. Like, in sort of simple ways, when we wanted to go to Haiti and work, and people were like, what are you doing? You're just artists, you're not architects, you're not an NGO, you're not disaster relief, like this isn't something that you have anything to contribute to necessarily. Not everyone said that, but certainly some people did. And it took a lot of a kind of a faith in my own, in our own thinking that we had something to give, in order to just sort of brave up and be like, we're going to follow our instinct on this. And I guess I would say that a lot of it has been about following instincts, about sort of getting an image or getting an idea, and then feeling it very strongly and totally irrationally, and being like, I don't know why I want to do this. This doesn't make that much sense. It's probably dangerous. It's definitely illegal. It's all this and that and the other thing. But then just being able to suspend all of those kind of rational thought processes and be like, I'm going to make a place for this, and I'm going to find people to help me. And I found, that was the thing where the story comes in, that you start telling that story and finding people that are inspired and that believe in it, and that you sort of just like make a little daisy chain, and you sort of build from there. And then also, like, this piece is to Lhasa, and it's so basically, when I'm from Florida. When the oil spill happened, I was really, really super intensely in the middle of working on Haiti. And so I was not in any way like kind of present with like what was going on, like how people were fighting, to clean up, or any of the other things that were going on. I just felt this kind of wounded feeling of being somebody who was like lifelong connected to the sea, and sort of understanding like where the scale of the disaster that had happened. And I literally just cried every day. And I was like, what is going on? I'm like losing my mind. And I decided with this piece that, I have a lot of different ways of working, and sometimes, like when we worked in Haiti, it was about sort of taking a direct approach to a situation and saying, here's a problem, how can we bring all of our ideas and resources to bear upon that problem, and how can we help try and solve it? And in this instance, I felt like I was more just sort of thinking about how do we as artists and thinkers kind of just emotionally and intellectually process events. And so I just wanted to take the idea of a sea deity just as a way to sort of define our relationship with nature, and just sort of think about how we relate to the sea and how I relate, and then just start sort of drawing from there, and just go through that process of sort of like intuitive kind of symbolic thinking that led me through the creation of that drawing. So this is funny. This is kind of quite way behind. So I think actually maybe now I should just like take a few more questions, and then, okay, cool. So I think everyone probably heard that question. It was about sort of walls and how you pick spaces. And I think that that's a larger question that relates maybe to everything I'm sorry that I wasn't able to kind of go over my body of work and present it to everyone so that everyone will know what I'm talking about. But I do a lot of different kinds of projects, from pasting on the street to the creation of architecture to, I also had spent about 4 years creating boats that went down the Mississippi, the Hudson, and in Venice. And I think that in each of those times there's like a bunch of central threads, and one of them is about context and the importance of context. And also here, Miranda asked me to do a project in New Orleans at the NOMA, and I came in and I was like, okay, what would it mean to work here? And I felt that, when I walked into the Great Hall, I was like, okay, there would be something kind of like awesomely wild about putting this kind of like beautiful, grotesque, sort of like giant hanging octopus jellyfish woman in the middle of these kind of like paintings of like British and French dudes with wigs. I just felt like that I was like, this is a context that speaks to me of creating a kind of a dissonance and working with it. And so I feel like that I'm kind of a little bit obsessed with context. And I think that a lot of, people who are sort of considered in the like the genre of street art, it's a lot about just feeling that like context and what you make are almost inseparable. And that although, as a printmaker, I'll make things that change context all the time, each time it's equally as important. And so I'm always, if I'm looking at walls, I'm choosing by texture, I'm choosing by color, I'm choosing by what the block feels like, I'm choosing by who I'm, assuming is going to see it, what are the uses of that space, trying to take into account all the different things about like how something would positively affect a community versus negatively. I mean, I love graffiti and I really believe in a participatory kind of relationship with the city, but I do have a kind of a sensitivity to people's homes and like what their various neighborhoods mean to them. Somebody asked about the gray ghost. Am I afraid of him? I mean, not really. I feel like he's just a neurotic graffiti artist as well, who's just like, I'm into gray. Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that at all.
How much street work have you done in this city?
In this city, I've done some. Each time I've come down, I've pasted a bit. So, I mean, I don't know, I would say like 10 or 15 pieces over a couple years. Yeah. So how did I choose the name Swoon? I was working outside for a little while and I didn't have any kind of a name. And then I noticed there's this artist named Bast, and he had a bunch of different things that he was working on, but he signed them all. And I actually was like, oh, that's kind of fun to see your thought process and hear you as a voice and be like, this isn't just kind of random noise. This is somebody who's sort of working out their thought process outside and kind of speaking to me. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Because I guess I had thought it was like a big kind of ego thing before, and it is, I mean, duh. But, also not. I also sort of was able to feel it as just sort of owning up to yourself and your presence and your process and just wanting to be sort of public and speak to people. And so my boyfriend at the time had a dream like years before that I was a graffiti writer and I wrote Swoon, which at the time I thought was totally absurd because I was like, oh, I'm a painter, like that would never blah blah blah. And then I was like, oh right, I remember that name. And I sort of feel like in that way that names should kind of choose you a bit. I just was like, okay. And the green shirt and the glasses. Who are some artists that inspire me? When I really love William Kentridge a lot. I would say that he was one of the people who really inspired me a lot at that time when I was first sort of finding myself. I already mentioned Gordon Motta Clark and Revs. Those guys are really amazing. I recently was seeing the William Kentridge exhibition at MoMA, and I saw Marina Abramovich sitting and looking at people, and there was something about that I found like surprisingly compelling. I think that that really took me by surprise how much I loved that work. And I mean, I think that like I have such a broad like base of like friends that I work with. I feel like I'm just basically internally inspired by those guys, by Jane Delaney and Ben and Taylor and Margot and Ricardo, Heidi and just like everybody. I think that that's like definitely my biggest source of inspiration. And then as far as like artists who are externally locatable, I mean, everyone always asks me about Kathy Kollwitz, and she's undoubtedly a huge influence of mine. Anyone else? Yes. My favorite adhesive is Golden Harvest powder with acrylic gel medium, if I can get my hands on it, and wood glue if I can't. Yeah. And there was a learning curve with wheat pasting as well. The first few times I did it, it was kind of a disaster. You have to wet the wall and wet the paper and paste over top, and